Now, how's this for a statistic? Starting today, for the rest of the year, the average woman in France is essentially working for free. That's because men are paid over 16% more than their female co-workers for doing the same or an equivalent job. To discuss the pay gap, my colleague Annette Young, the host of the 51%, is with me in the studio. And Annette, the figure's shocking enough as it is, but actually the pay gap is getting worse. It's gone from 15.5% in 2019 to 16.5% this year. Why are things getting worse?
Well, one big word, it's called the pandemic. And may I point out, Nadia, I hope you're feeling charitable because you and I apparently are working for free from now onwards until the end of the year. Well, we could be laughing, but, it's not a great figure, as you point out. In fact, it's pretty grim. What happened last year is, of course, the global economy went into free fall once the pandemic hit in March 2020 and right across the world. And those who are impacted the most within the workforce are those who are paid the less, of course. Not to mention the fact, for instance, in America alone, 3 million women, I'm going to repeat that statistic, 3 million women have lost their jobs between March 2020 and to this point, which is an extraordinary chunk of the US labour force. So many out there are most likely being told by their bosses and companies to forget pay rises as the economies start to slowly rebuild. It should come as no surprise that the pandemic has exacerbated the gender pay gap to the disadvantage, particularly of women with family responsibilities, due largely to childcare and educational requirements imposed by COVID-19 lockdowns. And of course, women bear the burden of care when it comes to looking after their families. And another important growing statistic to take into account when you talk about caring for others is aged parents, because the workforce is getting older. Parents are living longer. So in addition, there's that as well. A study conducted by Ipsos in the US has shown that the gender gap for childcare responsibility, sadly, is growing. It's not going the other way as it should be. It's going in reverse. But when we look at the pay gaps, where does France stand? Well, when it comes to Europe as a whole, it does perform better than Germany, but it's certainly worse than the European average, which is 14.1, and the American pay gap is around 16%.
Clearly something needs to change then here in France, and that what needs to be done at a governmental level and also at the level of companies?
Well, back in 2017, when he first assumed the job, President Macron said that gender equality was his number one priority. And sadly, here we are 4 years on, and look at what we have. We have a pay gap which is worsening. It's certainly increasing, not decreasing. So how do you close the gap? Legislation certainly helps, but top economists have pointed out a little toolkit for companies and workplaces to use. First of all, information about salaries needs to be shared. You need to share that salary information. It needs to be far more transparent. You need to, increase the minimum wage. You need to offer policies that allow families of both men and women to share the burden of childcare. So, equal amounts of parental leave for both mothers and fathers or whoever's looking after children per se. Now, for the employees, here's a little toolkit one may suggest, so get your pen and paper ready. When you're looking for a job, ask the following questions of your potential employer. Do women generally wait longer than men for promotions? Are female workers being shunted into lower paid jobs? Is the company culture welcoming to women? Look at things like childcare policy, holiday leave, leave in terms of family emergencies. And are there gender differences in non-salary compensation, such as bonuses, overtime opportunities and stock options? I mean, obviously that's the high end of the workplace, but there are enough questions there that I think all of us should be asking of our employers, because as much as the onus is on governments and it is on businesses, it's also on us as workers to be smart about it. So we've all got to play a part in this in order to decrease that gender pay gap.
All right, really interesting stuff. Thanks very much indeed, Annette Young, for us there on the programme.